All right. Welcome, everyone, to the first V-Briefly video interview of the season with VBI staffer Sekou. Today, we're going to be discussing how to prepare for the upcoming season and the first couple of tournaments in what is sure to be an informative interview. So without further ado, hey, Sekou, thanks for doing this.
Hey, no problem.
Alrighty, so for those of you who don't know much about you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you debated for, what you're up to now, maybe one of your favorite debate or camp memories?
Yeah, got you. So my name is Sekou Cisse. I debated for 3.5 years at Success Academy High School in New York. I did LD, as most of y'all know. I had some debate success. I won a couple tournaments, a couple round robins. Also lost a couple of tournaments and a couple round robins. Right now, I'm debating at Wake Forest University. Love my schedule so far. Favorite debate or camp memory would probably be winning Harvard, just because it was just a really cool experience. Came back to debate after like 6-7 months not debating, and it was just really cool to see everyone back again, get back into my little K literature, and yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about that Harvard tournament a little bit later. It's pretty iconic, TBH. But you also mentioned that you're doing college policy debate for Wake. So what's been cool about that, and how's the transition from like LD to policy been?
So college policy has been dope so far. I personally think I'm on the best team in the country. The Wake debate machine is amazing. I love all my teammates. The biggest sort of change from college policy is being able to explain your arguments in more than 4 minutes in a 1AR. So like in college policy, speeches range from 6 to 9 minutes, and you have to go much more in depth into different literature bases. And it also means that the people that you're debating are going to have tons of prep against common arguments. So you really need to get good at one type of argument and just being able to kind of just like beat people on that argument. The transition from LD to policy has been pretty cool. We had a little debate retreat at Wake Forest, and those debates went really well. I noticed that like all my little line by line stuff that I learned in LD transferred really well into policy because it's not that big of a thing. But my first tournament's in 10 days at Georgia State University, which I'm getting ready for. And I'm actually debating with Brianna, and she taught at BVI, so that's going to be dope.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, you're partnering with Brianna? I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's also a bunch of other VBI staffers that are on the Wake team. So like Aida, I think Nadia is assisting,
Nadia.
Right? Is there anyone I'm forgetting?
Aida, Nadia, me, Brianna, and I think that's it. Yeah.
That's a pretty large group of kids.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so enough about college policy. Let's talk about your, I would say, illustrious, and I don't think that's an overstatement, debate career. So you had like a decent sophomore year in LD, but your junior year is, I think, where people, first saw you and you start coming in swinging at tournaments. And if I remember correctly, I think you got to finals of Yale, which is like the first bid tournament of the season. So what did you do between the summer of your sophomore year and your junior year to improve so much? And what did you do before the Yale tournament to prepare?
So the summer before my junior year was actually the first year I went to VBI, and I went to 2 different camps during that summer. One of them was GDS, the other one was VBI. GDS didn't really learn too much, but when I came to VBI, I had great lab leaders: Elijah Smith, Bennett Eckert, Sarah Ryan, Case on Top. I will never forget it. It's my favorite lab by far. That was really the lab where not only I learned the fundamentals of not only LG, but just kind of debate in general. So we did tons of like Kobayashi Marus, which are like extremely hard drills that kids aren't supposed to do. We did tons of just drills on different 1AR scenarios, different 2NR scenarios. And the biggest thing about being in that lab was just the focus or attention on cutting cards and doing work. So like day 1 at camp, we came in the kind of like grass area, and Elijah was like, if you want to be good and if you want to be in top lab, because we were in second lab, you're going to cut 40 cards tonight. And if you want to be better than that, you're going to cut 50 to show me that you're baller. And then everyone like didn't even have a change of face. Everyone cut those 40 cards. Some of us cut 50. And then I think that through that work ethic, that kind of helped me go into my junior year. So after I left VBI, The day the topic came out, cut 40 cards because I remember that's what I had to do in order to be in Top Lab. The next day, cut 30 cards. Next day, cut 20 cards. Next day, cut 10 cards. And then I cut 10 cards from when the topic came out to when Yale actually was. So in doing that, I had literally hundreds of cards to like pick and choose from. And I think that really helped me just because I had like a large range of arguments that I could go for, but also because I was doing the work of cutting the cards, I knew what the argument said, I knew what the card said. So by not recutting off the wiki, I knew how to execute and use the words and the language of my author in my 2NRs and my 2ARs to make good debates happen. And before Yale, I went to Byram Hills and round robin. The round robin didn't do too well just because it was like my first real shot at being good at varsity LD, but at the tournament, I got to finals. And I think that that was just a testament to all the work I did. And then from losing in finals, I realized that in order to do well at Yale, I'd have to do more work. So it was just cutting more cards, doing more speeches, and just getting into that like debate mindset. So like doing 1ARs on conditionality in the shower, or like when I'm walking to school, giving a 2-hour overview in Afro-pessimism.
Yeah, and so obviously I don't think anything beats hard work in debate. And so was there like a direction that you had when you were like cutting the cards? Were you just cutting everything that you saw, or did you have like game plans when you were trying to figure out what you should do prep on next?
Yeah, so in terms of cutting the actual cards, going into my junior year, I realized that in my sophomore year, everyone kind of hated me as like, this kid's the new K debater on the Northeast, which means that we need to really get good at answering the K. So during that summer, I realized that I had to get kind of good at everything. So I would cut at least 10 cards on the Act and Egg from a sort of critical perspective, then cut 20 cards from a policy perspective, and then cut 10 cards from a field perspective on each side, just so that I knew the different ways that people were going to engage arguments on the topic. And if I had cut them, I also knew how to answer those arguments. So in doing that, it was really, really easy for me to make A2 Cont F, A2 XYZ Policy F, A2 XYZ KF, which made it easier for me to just go in and execute in debates.
Okay. And so not only did you, I think, like come into this season just like swinging hard, getting to finals of Yale, but I think you just got better as junior year went along. And a lot of people, they have some success here and there, like they get to, deep outruns of a tournament, they get their bid, but you just kept on bidding and you just kept on winning. So what was, other than hard work, because I think at this point, no one can doubt that you just did way too much of it. What was the, what do you think were like the secrets to your consistent improvement and success?
So I think number one was just kind of watching people on YouTube a lot. I didn't really have a coach freshman / sophomore year, so that was just me kind of watching tons and tons of college policy debates. So I remember watching a ton of Devon and Nicole just because they were kind of like my role models in terms of how to be a great debater that's not just a K debater, but can also like whip people on framework and whip people on different policy arguments. So through watching tons of college policy debates, I kind of picked up on tendencies. I remember watching this one debate where Cal MS was debating. They had a debate at John Spurlock, who started every like 2NR with, there are 3 ways that you can walk yourself to a Cal MS ballot. And then he kind of just gave the 3 arguments that he was going to go for in the 2NR. And I remember literally every single 2NR my junior year started with, there are 3 ways that you can walk yourself to a Success Academy SC ballot. And then just kind of that. So it was just taking bits and pieces from kind of everyone in the debate community writ large and kind of putting my own twist on it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like, I don't think people watch enough debate rounds. Like, the only way that I ever like sort of self-taught myself debate was just like watching everyone who's good at debate. And that Cal MS overview is like iconic. And I actually did not realize that you had stolen it from them, but that's a good move. Okay, so yeah. Hard work, just watch a lot of debate rounds. So I really don't think there's any question that like junior year you was just like incredible. But we also can't ignore the fact that, during your senior year, you didn't debate as much, but you still came in and just won the whole Harvard tournament. Like, you had not debated in how many months? Like 4 or 5?
Since September, this like 5 months, yeah.
5 months, like 5 months not touch a tournament, and you just like go into one of the most difficult tournaments of the year, and you like win the whole thing. I think you lose 1 ballot along the entire way. Is that right? Yeah. So how did you accomplish that? Like, I mean, I'm sure some people are out there just like, how did that happen? Like they probably think it's a fluke. But I know for a fact it's not a fluke. So what did you do to win that tournament?
Okay, so I didn't debate that much my senior year. So like I went to the Byram Hills round robin and tournament, did well at those. Then I went to Green Hill, did like okay at Green Hill. And then I kind of got to this point in my debate career where I was just like, damn, I'm not winning tournaments and this kind of sucks. So like kind of take a break. There's some other external reasons. But then in coming back to Harvard, I remember my principal asking me, do you just like kind of want a fresh start? And I was like, why not? And in doing that, I realized I had no prep on the topic. Had to talk to the debate team at my school in months. So I reached out. I had already gotten into Wake Forest, so I reached out to some of the people on the team and tried to see like what arguments they were reading in college. And I remember talking to Nate and Roberto, and they gave me this Onto article by Warren, which was about Black queer people. And I realized the topic was about the criminal justice system and plea bargains. And I was like, wow, this can make a really good critical argument. So into going into Harvard, I kind of just focused on this one article, read it probably 10 times for the tournament, cut the article, probably like 30 cards from that article. And then in doing that, I proceeded to cut a link to just every app on the wiki. And after that, cutting multiple links to different apps, I kind of just came into Harvard knowing what I was going to say to everyone's positions, because they didn't really switch it up that much, because Harvard is still like a pretty good distance away from the TOC. So everything was just kind of what they were reading at Lexington and Emory and blah, blah, blah. So after cutting all those link arguments, I just kind of really focused on this critique. The most important thing I think about Harvard was just knowing the literature. So like when people read arguments, they're usually just recut from the wikis, but because I read that article, I realized the words that Warren was using to make his argument. So I wrote out overviews, which I think no one does in LD, which are super, super important. I had an overview for my 2NR, for my 2AR, for my 1AR, also had 1NC case overviews. And in those overviews, I would kind of like slip in technical LD arguments, but then also add a little bit of the theory from Warren, which just like made it really hard for people to answer. Also, I just think that after not debating for 5 months, I was like, I want to reclaim the space as mine again. And I just kind of went in with an attitude of, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much prep you've done. I don't care how long you've been debating. I'm going to go into this debate with $100 on me every single time. And I was just kind of confident in that argument. And the last thing that I'd say for Harvard was that I kind of went back to my roots. So instead of doing like the whole policy, field, theory, framework thing, I just straight up went for this onto-side argument on the AF and neg. And it was just a little nostalgic, but it was a good kind of nostalgia. I think that's the word, because it brought me back to my sophomore year where I kind of just only did K-debate, and going 1-off-4 critique in every 2NR just was like a place at home for me, and I love doing it.
So one of the things that everyone sort of knows about you is just like you have that ethos. And I think some people are like, that's just, you just have it. And I'm sure you do. But I think one of the things that this interview is like really, hitting home for me is just that ethos did not come about just because you were born with it, but because you did the work, you read the literature, and that ethos is inseparable from like the prep that you've done. Can you just talk a little bit more about, like, because a lot of kids are like, I think I do the work. I just don't have that ethos. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
So one, this comes with kind of just reading your arguments more than anyone else has. So like when you write an AF, there's no way you should not have read that AF at least 50 times before the first tournament of the season. And every time that you read that, you should have a coach or anyone. You should actually not even take a coach. You should take anyone in your home, anyone of your friends that knows absolutely nothing about debate, and you should read your 1AC or you should read your 1NC link cards to them and try and persuade them. Because even though you're spreading, if you can make sure that your ethos is there and you can make sure that you are just kind of speaking confidently and controlling a room to people that know absolutely nothing about what you're talking about, you will be in a much better space for Yale, for Harvard, for Berkeley, or even the TOC, just because you have practiced giving speeches to people that don't understand debate lingo. And then once you get into actual debates, the fact that you can sort of persuade people that don't know what debate is and then add all of the LD technical jargon to it, it just makes for like an amazing debater every single time. So I think that before Yale, before Byram Hills, before Loyola, your first tournaments of the season, definitely get your mom, get your dad, get your friends, get anyone. Read your 1ACs to them. They might think you sound crazy, but the point is that you should not sound crazy to them by the end of you reading the 1AC, and you should be persuading them enough to do that. Also, I just think it comes with just time. So like at different tournaments, especially the first tournaments of the season, because they don't really matter in terms of qualifying for the TOC, or if you're a younger debater, a freshman or sophomore, take the time to read different affirmatives, take the time to read different 1NC strategies, and practice on inflecting your voice on different words, and also just making sure that you are hitting home to the judges with really specific impacts. And I think that what's missing in terms of Ethos from a lot of debaters is kind of just impact analysis. Because people just kind of say things like, anti-Blackness is bad, and then move on, or economic collapse is bad, but then move on. But like, no, that is not it. Economic collapse leads to people no longer having homes anymore. People can't feed their families, XYZ. You need to go into the in-depth, like the actual crux of what your argument is. So like, yes, anti-Blackness is bad, but why is it bad? What does it produce for Black people? What does it produce in civil society? And if you can go that extra step in explanation, it'll just help you engage in Ethos. And the last thing I would say about Ethos is just, I think what really helped me was when I started my debate career, I read arguments that kind of mattered to me. And because they mattered to me, I just like instinctively cared more about it, cared more about how people responded to it. So if you're reading arguments from your social location, but can find topical arguments to sort of bring them back into the LD world, I think that's perfect.
Yeah. So the last big question I have for you here is, for those of them or those of the listeners that are preparing for their first tournaments of the season, so what's the best advice that you have for them? Like, how should they be prepping? What should be their mindset at tournaments? What areas should they focus on improving on? And especially for those that, don't have a huge coaching program, and if you didn't really have much of a huge coaching program either, like what should they be doing to go in and to start winning?
So number one, I would say YouTube is your best friend if you don't have a coaching staff. I know Victory Briefs they uploaded at least like 50 videos from last season from debates that you can watch from people that were in the quarters, the semis, the finals of different tournaments. I think that'll be really good just to see the trends in LE now. But then the second thing that I would say for preparing for the first tournaments of the season is don't be afraid of taking losses early. I think this is advice someone should have told me last year, because when I lost in like the quarters of Green Hill, I just like thought it was over. I was like, damn it, I just can't beat the Cap K. It's like over. I'll never be able to beat it, blah, 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 blah. But at Harvard, I made Cap K tons of times, and like it was fine. I just needed to understand that I'm going to lose earlier in the season. And it's better to lose earlier in the season to arguments that you know you're going to debate later in the season. So take the time when you lose to these arguments to go back home, do the rebuttal redo so that you have perfectly timed responses to these things and you won't be in that situation later in the season. I think that specifically for Byram Hills and Loyola, which are the first tournaments of the season, if you are not rolling in with at least 40 cards on the app and 40 cards on the neg, you're doing yourself wrong. I think that you need to do the work, just because if you aren't doing the work, I promise you there's going to be 30 other people in the country that are doing the work, and they will see you in round one of Loyola and beat you on arguments that you could have cut, but you chose not to. So I think go back on YouTube, watch tons of videos, do at least 40 cards on the AF and neg, and then also I think that you have at least one of everything, and that means one policy AF, one full AF, one KAF, and then I also think that you should have one critique, one counterplan, one topical disad, and then one NC. And then after that, you literally now have all of the arguments that you need in order to answer anything in LD debate. And then from that point on, it just takes doing blocks. So during these first tournaments, you're going to see arguments being uploaded to the wiki. That also means that you, your teammates, your coaches, even if you don't have any, you should be focused on writing responses and having blocks to arguments that are broken. Because I found that yes, people use the wiki, but they don't utilize it in the right way. People are going to be uploading arguments that respond to your best 20C, that respond to your best critique. You need to take the time to not only recut their arguments because they can respond to anyone that has stolen your app off of the wiki. But then also in reading the arguments that you now recut from their wiki, you can now build the blocks, and the ways to respond to those arguments will come to you much, much quicker because you know the argument that you're responding to now. So I just think that it takes a ton of prep. You need to have one of everything, at least 40 cards. Also, last really important thing is that I noticed that when you had 30 case turns for every tournament, you would be swept. So when you're negative and you're debating a new app and none of your like topical critiques or topical diss ads matter anymore, if you can have just a Word doc of 30 case turns that you can pick and choose from, those are great to just put on the case. And people in LD usually drop case turns because they don't think that they're that important and they're more inclined to answer like the econ just said. But if you can have explain case turns, which means that it's not just cutting the card, it's also writing out the case turn extension for the 2NR, the 1AR overview, the 2NR critique overview. That all needs to be done in order to be prepared for these tournaments, because you can't walk into Yale thinking that you're going to be able to read a 5-minute critique on Afro-pessimism and be able to answer 1AR that is filled with answers to Afro-pessimism in 6 minutes without pre-written answers to these answers to the Afro-pessimism critique. So make sure that you have blocks to your arguments, overviews to your arguments, one of everything. Make sure that you are scouring the YouTube. There are tons of LD modules that I know happen at Victory Briefs that are also uploaded. Like 2017, it can teach you the different basics of theory, of topicality, of the critique. So you can watch those videos, get good reminders of what those things are, and remember, practice, practice, practice. The topic is out. If you already don't have 40 cards, you're doing something wrong. So after watching this interview, make sure that you cut 10 cards tonight. I think that if you cut 10 cards tonight for your first tournament and also dedicate 30 minutes to doing speaking drills every day, you will be a much, much better debater from the beginning of this interview. So take that into consideration, and I hope y'all do well at your first tournaments this season.
All right, all of that advice, wholeheartedly agree with. I don't think there's anyone that can go wrong with doing a lot of work and watching the YouTubes. All right, so I think that's it. So thanks for doing this, Sekou, and hopefully the listeners found this helpful and they actually followed the advice that you presented here. Do you have any like last minute shout outs you want to throw out to anyone out there?
Last minute shout outs? Dang. All right, shout out to Go D, shout out to everybody on Wake Debate. Not gonna name y'all because it's too many of y'all. Shout out to all my BBI family. Brittany, Devon, Carlos, Willie, Aida, Sonny, Darius, Ryan, just everybody. All the Black staff of BBI, I loved y'all. Y'all made the summer amazing for me. Hopefully I'm coming back next year so we can chill out, teach amazing kids. Shout out to Victory Squads. All my kids are on it. We had our first meeting last week. We're getting pumped and ready for our first tournaments of the season, which is going to be amazing. Shout out to my old principal, Mr. Malone. Help me get into it. I love you. You are amazing. And yeah, shout out to anyone that has ever believed in me. And I hope everyone does well during this day season and has an amazing school year.
All right. Yeah, I agree with that. So this has been a Victory Briefs interview. Thanks you all for listening.